The third physical property which we are going to study is luster. Metals possess luster. So let us know what is that. Third physical property we are going to study is luster. Generally, students, metals possess shiny and reflecting surfaces. So the substances which possess shiny and reflecting surfaces are termed under the metals. So substances which have shiny and reflecting surfaces are generally metals. So students, this is also one way to see that whether the substance which we have is a metal or a non-metal. Metals are the substances whose surfaces are shiny and reflecting. Therefore, those substances which have shiny and reflecting surfaces are generally termed as metals. Now, what are the examples of metals? This we all are familiar with. Examples. The very famous example is of gold. I'm writing the symbol also along, and the symbol of gold is AU. Now, what is the reason behind they being shiny? So, the reason behind their shiny and reflecting surfaces is that the metals have atoms in which there are freely held electrons, and when those freely held electrons vibrate, then we see the shine from the metals. So students, the reason behind their shiny and reflecting surfaces is electronic vibrations of free electrons. As metals have freely held electrons, so when light falls on those freely held electrons, they vibrate. And because of these electronic vibrations, we see the luster from the metals. Students, now there are not much exceptions to this property. Generally, all the metals possess luster, but there are certain non-metals also like graphite and iodine, which being non-metals, but still they have luster. Now, fourth physical property is malleability. What is malleability? It is a property of the metals by which they can be beaten into thin sheets. So what is malleability? Metals can be beaten into thin sheets. And when the metals can be beaten into thin sheets, this property of metals is known as malleability. Very good examples we have. Let us study the examples. Examples are like aluminium, gold, silver. Aluminium having symbol Al. We have gold also as the example with symbol Au. Another good example showing malleability is silver, which is having symbol Ag. Now, what is the reason behind their malleability? Let us know the reason. The reason behind the malleability is the elastic nature of the metals. The reason is elastic nature of metals. And because of the elastic nature of the metals, they can bear the stress. They can bear stress. Now students, we have aluminium, gold and silver as the examples of the metals which possess malleability. We see in our daily life also that we have aluminium foils in which the foodstuff is wrapped. We have silver foils which are used for decorative purposes of the sweets. So students, these are the very good examples which clearly show us that metals can be beaten into thin sheets. Now one example, one exception to malleability is of zinc. What is the exception now? An exception to malleability is of the metal, which is zinc. Generally, students, zinc is not malleable at various temperatures, but at certain temperature it becomes slightly malleable, but generally it comes under the exception. So generally the metals can be beaten into thin sheets, therefore they are known as malleable. We have good examples of aluminium foils, silver foils, etc. And the reason behind is the elastic nature of the metals. As they are elastic, so they can bear the stress. Now, fifth property is ductility. Now, the fifth property is ductility. What is ductility? It is the property of the metals by which they can be drawn into thin wires or cables. So, it is the property of metals by which they can be drawn into thin wires or chains, we can say. So as malleability is the property of the metals by which they can be beaten into thin sheets, ductility is the property of the metals by which they can be drawn into thin wires or chains. Very good examples, let us see. Examples are like gold, silver, copper, etc. Now, what is the reason behind their ductility? Let us study the reason. The reason is same as that for malleability. Because of the elastic nature of the metals, they can bear the stress. So, the reason is elastic nature of metals. Because of the elastic nature of the metals, they can be easily drawn into thin wires. And the best ductile metal is gold. And the best, or we can say the most ductile metal is gold. Students, it would be astonishing for you as even 1 gram of gold can be drawn into a wire of 2 kilometers long. So the most ductile metal is gold. I hope, students, it is clear. We have exception also. When we talk of the exception, under the exception, the metal which is not ductile, that is zinc. So I hope, students, these physical properties are clear to you. Let us take some more physical properties. Now, next physical property which we are going to study is thermal conductivity. So, sixth physical property now we are going to study, and that is thermal conductivity. Let us know what is thermal conductivity. When a substance transfers the heat from one end to the other end, that is actually known as thermal conductivity. So the transference of the heat from one part to the other part is known as thermal conductivity. Transfer of heat. As students, you can see the word thermal deals with the heat. So it is the transfer of the heat from one part of the substance to the other part. And when we talk of the metals, metals are generally good conductors of heat. So they have high thermal conductivity. Metals have high thermal conductivity. Let us see the examples of metals which have high thermal conductivity. So the examples include silver, Silver is having symbol Ag. Copper is having symbol Cu. Aluminium is having symbol Al. And out of these three metals which I have written, silver is the best conductor of heat. Students, we have seen that in making the utensils, generally copper and aluminium is used. I hope the reason is clear to you. Why these are used in making the utensils? Because these are good conductors of heat. We must have seen that when we heat the utensil from the bottom, whole of the pot of the utensil becomes hot. What is the reason behind that? It clearly shows that the heat from the bottom is transferred to whole of the pot. This shows the thermal conductivity of the metals. And generally the utensils are made up of copper and aluminium. Though silver is the best conductor of heat, the reason is that silver is very costly. So the metals from which the utensils are generally made are copper and aluminium. Now what is the reason behind the thermal conductivity of the metals? When we try to heat the metal from the one side, the kernels and the electrons which are present, they become hot and they transfer the heat to the other part. So these are the kernels and the electrons which are responsible for the transference of the heat. Now when we talk of the exception, generally I am saying that metals are good conductors of heat, but there are certain metals like mercury and lead which are poor conductors of heat. So when I have to talk about the exception that I am going to take is of the poor conductors of heat. Here lead is having symbol Pb, mercury, and you know the symbol of mercury is Hg. These are poor conductors of heat, are poor conductors of heat. I hope students it is clear that generally metals are good conductors of heat. They possess high thermal conductivity. Now next physical property is electrical conductivity. Let us study what is that. What about the electrical conductivity? Electrical conductivity of metals. As metals are good conductors of heat, they are also good conductors of electricity. So metals have high electrical conductivity. High electrical conductivity. Now let us see what are the examples of the metals which have high electrical conductivity. Let us talk about the examples. Under the examples, the best conductor of electricity is silver. So first example, which is of the best conductor of electricity, is silver. We have many more metals also which possess high electrical conductivity, and those are copper, aluminium, which is Al, etc. Now students, what is the reason behind the electrical conductivity of the metals? What is the reason? Students, the reason behind the electrical conductivity of the metals is because of the free electrons. The free electrons transfer the electricity from the one part of the metal to the other part. So the reason is because of the free electrons which are present in the metals. As students, we know that the reason behind the electrical conductivity of the metals or solids is because of the free electrons, whereas the reason for the electrical conductivity of any solution is because of the free ions. I hope it is clear. Now students, you must have seen when we put the plug of the television in the pinhole, television starts working. Actually, the cables which connect the pinhole to the television, these contain inside the metal wires. And as metals are good conductor of electricity, therefore the television works. I hope students it is clear to you. We have certain exceptions also. Let us study about the exceptions. Here the exceptions which I am going to take are of the metals which are poor conductors of electricity. Among those we have mercury. Mercury provides high resistance to the flow of the electricity, so mercury is a poor conductor. Conductor of electricity. Now next physical property which we are going to study is sonority. What is that? Eighth physical property we are going to study now is sonority. It is the property of the metals by which they produce ringing sound when they are struck hard. So the property of the metals by which they produce ringing sounds when struck hard. So students, generally the metals are known as sonorous because they possess the property that they produce ringing sounds when they are struck hard. So it is actually the property in which they produce the ringing sound when struck hard. We have various examples. Students, if the coin drops on the floor, we hear the sound, and that is because the metals are sonorous. One very good example is of the handbell which is used in the schools. Handbells are made up of metals, and when they are struck hard, we hear the sound. I hope students it is clear to you. I have told you with the help of the example. We have wind chimes also. Those are also made up of metals, and we can clearly hear the sound also. So these were the few physical properties. We are left with some more physical properties. Let us study about those physical properties now. Now let us study the ninth physical property, which is about the strength of metals. So ninth physical property is regarding the strength of metals. Metals generally possess high strength. So by saying that they possess high strength, I mean that they can hold heavy weights without breaking. So they have high strength. They have high strength. That means they can hold heavy weights without snapping. And what is snapping? Snapping is breaking. That means without breaking, it can hold heavy weight. And students, let us see the example which shows that they have high strength. So example, a very famous example which we all know, that the bridges are made up of iron, and iron is a metal. We know that heavy vehicles daily move on the iron bridges. Therefore, the iron possesses high strength because it can hold heavy weight without breaking. So example is of iron bridges. Iron bridges. Now what is the reason behind they having high strength? The reason is high or strong electrostatic forces of attraction between the kernels and the electrons which are present in the atom. So students, the reason is that the high forces of attraction between the kernels and the electrons of the atoms of the metal, they result in having the high strength. Now let us have the exception also. Though metals have high strength, but we have exceptions also of the metals which have very low strength, and that those are sodium and potassium. Sodium and potassium. These metals have low strength. Now next physical property is about their color. What about the color of the metals? Metals generally have grayish or silverish color. So they have generally generally have grayish or silverish color. This we all know that metals generally have grayish or silverish color. The examples we can take of silver, aluminium. So examples will include silver, which obviously has silverish color. We have aluminium also, which is also having silverish grayish color. Now there are exceptions also. I hope you can make out what are the exceptions. Exceptions are like copper. What is the color of copper? The color of copper is brownish red. Under the exceptions, we can cover copper, which is having color reddish brown. Next exception is gold. This also you all know that what is the color of gold? Goldenish color, yellowish color. Yellowish color. So I hope with this the color of the metals is also clear to you. Now next physical property is that they form alloys also very easily. So next physical property is alloy formation. What are alloys? Steel, bronze, brass, etc. Students, these are alloys. Now what are alloys? These are the homogeneous mixtures of two or more metals, or there can be sometime a non-metal also. So alloys are homogeneous mixtures of two or more metals. So these are homogeneous. I hope you remember what are homogeneous mixtures. You studied in your 9th class. So these are the homogeneous mixtures of two or more metals, and there can be sometime a non-metal also. So these are homogeneous mixtures of two or more metals. Let us take the examples now. As I told you, brass, bronze, these are not the elements. These are not come under the category of metals, neither they are non-metals. These are actually alloys, homogeneous mixture of metals. Let us take the example. We have brass. Brass is an alloy of copper and zinc. Copper and zinc. So students, if the question comes that what are the components of brass? Brass is an alloy which is made up of copper and zinc. What about bronze? Bronze is also an alloy. It is an alloy of copper and tin. Tin is having symbol SN. So I hope it is clear that metals indulge in the formation of alloys also, and certain examples of alloys we have seen here. Brass is an alloy which is made up of copper and zinc. Bronze is also an alloy which is made up of copper and tin. So students, these were the physical properties of the metals. I hope the physical properties of metals are clear to you. Next we will study the chemical properties, and before studying the chemical properties, we will first study what is the activity series of metals, because activity series of metals is very important before studying the chemical properties of the metals.